Hey guys, tonight we're chasing hooves across desert wind and royal ambition. The sun's barely down, but the dust's already rising on a dream so bold, it stitches an empire together, from scorching plains to snowy peaks. You're standing in a place where there are no phones, no telegraphs, no quick DMs, just a king who wants his word to fly. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this job unless you like sprinting through lion territory with a message tied to your belt. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your city and the local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with Cyrus the Great. You're not looking at a king in robes lounging on cushions. You're looking at a man pacing barefoot on packed earth, tracing lines in the sand with a stick. His empire's just been born, young, sprawling, and cranky with distance. Messages take days. Revolts happen faster than his messengers can shout. You're watching him scowl at a map stretched across a carpet, its corners held down with polished stones from the Tigris. And then he says it, we need roads. Fast ones. Wide enough for a horse team and royal enough to smell like cinnamon oil. Okay, maybe not the cinnamon part, but you get the vibe. Cyrus didn't invent roads, but he invented the idea of a road with purpose. A road that didn't just lead to a city, but led to everyone, quickly. The Achaemenid Empire was vast, Egypt to India vast, and without a fast way to send orders, he knew it'd collapse before the ink dried on his first royal decree. You watch his engineers groan. You want to run a straight road through that mountain? Yep. And that river? Definitely. Cyrus doesn't care if it's rock, water, or an angry goat herd. He wants a path so solid that a single message can run 1,500 miles without changing sandals. Historians still argue whether this first blueprint was fully mapped under Cyrus himself or whether his successors, especially Darius I, expanded it with more polish and paranoia. But you can see the dust rising already, and it's not just from your itchy feet. They start with earth beaten flat by marching soldiers. Then comes gravel. Then, luxury alert, crushed limestone near Capo routes. At its peak, some roads even get stone-paved stretches. But most of what you walk on is packed dirt, and it's hot enough to toast barley cakes by noon. There's no GPS, of course, but markers crop up, stone stacks, cedar signs, even carved falcons to say, yep, you're still on the King's Highway. By the time the plan hits stride, roads stretch from Susa in the Persian heartland to Sardis in western Anatolia, more than 2,700 kilometers. You could ride it, theoretically, in 9 days. On foot, you're looking at 3 months, 2 blisters, and 1 existential crisis. And these roads? They don't just help messengers. You see merchants with sandal straps chewing into their ankles, priests towing incense wagons, even elephants plodding from one satrapy to the next. It's empire, delivered daily. But the crown jewel, the true reason for all this dust, is the postal relay. You watch the early seeds of it now, a lone horseman galloping in from the horizon, scroll tied to his belt, beard streaked with wind. He doesn't slow. He just yells, tosses the message to a fresh rider, and that man bolts off like he's late for the apocalypse. The system's not perfect yet. Sometimes, horses die. Sometimes, riders get distracted by attractive shepherds. Once, a courier misread a dispatch and accidentally told a city to execute its own governor. Oops. Still, the bones are there. And Cyrus? He's smiling. His words are finally faster than his fears. For the first time in ancient history, information begins to outrun the sword. And yes, some French scholars claim the idea was lifted from older Assyrian models, or inspired by nomadic herder routes. But even if Cyrus didn't invent the concept from scratch, he made it royal, reliable, and unforgettable. You rest on a stone mile marker now. The wind smells like horse sweat and dry time. Somewhere ahead, someone's waiting on a message. And you? You're just getting started. You squint into the sunrise, and it's already too bright. The hoofbeats are the first thing you hear, steady, rhythmic, and close. A courier thunders toward the way station, leather satchel bouncing against his side, dust curling behind like a cloak. He doesn't slow down. Not even a little. Instead, he lets out a practiced bark, one word, and throws the satchel toward the fresh rider already waiting, fingers twitching with anticipation. And just like that, The message moves on. One horseman out, another in, no tea, no chat, no time to even adjust the saddle. These are Persia's first relay riders, the royal commandos of communication, and you are now watching the most synchronized dismount in the ancient world. This isn't a freelance gig. These riders are trained, lean, and unusually polite about saddle hygiene. They serve the king, and only the king. It doesn't matter if your mother is dying in Babylon or if you accidentally delivered the same message to the same outpost twice last week. If your scroll says Royal Post, then that's what you ride for. And oh, the scrolls. Tied with twine, sealed with wax, and usually marked with a wreath stamp featuring the imperial insignia, a winged figure or lion head sunburst. The messages are always urgent, always cryptic to outsiders. Sometimes they're just 2 words long, assemble troops. Other times, you crack one open and it's an 8-foot-long inventory of missing grain sacks in Cappadocia. Glamorous? No. Important? Apparently very. One fringe inscription hints that some early messages were delivered orally, writer to writer like a game of empire-sized telephone. Did this lead to attacks on squash exports turning into Squash the Export Minister? Entirely possible. Historians still argue whether the relay system began purely under Darius, or if Cyrus laid the original foundation with a much scrappier model. What's agreed upon is that the refinement, the real mechanical beauty of it, comes later. But here, now, in your dusty sandals and sunburned ears, it's all just speed and trust. Riders change out every 15 to 20 miles. That's about the limit for a horse running full tilt with a human clinging like a determined sack of flour. You get to know the terrain, soft riverbank sprints, thorny hillside scrambles, and that one terrifying patch near the Zagros Mountains where eagles stare just a bit too long at your exposed neck. Most riders carry nothing but the message and a dagger. They trust the system so completely that they ride into strange satrapies without passports, without coin, and sometimes, worryingly, without pants. In colder regions, they wear wool. In hotter ones, almost nothing at all. One famed rider, Artaphons the Bald, was said to wrap scrolls around his arms so tightly the ink stained his skin for weeks. There's even a legend of a courier so loyal, he continued his route after being bitten by a snake. Instead of deterring for help, he sucked the venom out himself, unclear how, slapped some mud on it, and galloped the final 2 stations just to ensure the message arrived on time. The letter, by the way, was about a broken chariot axle. Empire priorities. You pass another outpost, mud brick walls, low wooden beams, and a hitching post swarming with tethered horses. The outpost keeper, grizzled and deeply unimpressed by your blistered feet, offers a cold drink and a warm warning. If you can't mount in 10 seconds flat, you're holding up history. Because these aren't just riders, they're vessels of the king's voice, sometimes bringing promotions, sometimes exile, sometimes a letter that changes a village's fate forever. And when they ride, they don't ride for you, they ride through you. The message doesn't care who you are. It just wants to move. Some satraps, the empire's regional governors, tried to interfere, slowing messages to filter out bad news or rewrite scrolls. Those governors? They usually disappeared. The message always arrives eventually. Sometimes with a replacement satrap tied to it. And that's when it hits you. These early couriers weren't just messengers, they were part of the empire's nervous system. They didn't move information, they were the information, wrapped in sweat and leather, bridging provinces, mountains, and ideologies with each gallop. You sit under a date palm now, skin buzzing from the sun, heart still beating to the rhythm of a distant hoofbeat. Someone out there is reading a letter that just crossed 1,000 miles, and for a moment, it feels like time itself is being tamed. Your feet land with a soft thud on the packed surface of the King's Road, and you can already tell this isn't just a path, it's a performance. Every stone feels like it was placed by someone who wasn't allowed to blink until it sat straight. This is no wandering donkey trail. This is a statement, we are here. And we can reach you faster than your rebellion can start cooking breakfast. The King's Road begins in Susa, the empire's beating bureaucratic heart, and runs westward like a spine of ambition all the way to Sardis. Nearly 2,700 kilometers of unbroken determination, carved through mountain passes, bridged across rivers, and, in some absurd places, tunneled beneath cliffs like an ancient highway version of pure spite. You didn't think the Persians were this extra, but here you were, dodging oxen traffic and wondering how they even paved the high-altitude bits. You pass mile markers made of black basalt, shaped like obelisks, each whispering, "You are still within the king's grasp." One carved lion along the route even has a chipped paw from when a horse skidded into it at full gallop. The horse was fine. The rider was reportedly demoted to scroll cleaner. And the terrain, oh, it shifts like moods at a royal banquet. One minute, you're in fertile plains dotted with fig trees and loitering goats. The next, you're squinting at dry cliffs with vultures performing synchronized aerial judgment above. Despite the wild variance, the road stays smooth, well, smooth enough. If you've ever tried sprinting full speed over cracked limestone, you'll understand why most couriers walked bow-legged by their third year. Historians still argue whether the original roadbed came from older Elamite routes or if it was all Persian innovation. But the King's Road as it comes into being now? That's Darius I's masterpiece, part military express lane, part postal autobahn, part panic hotline. And speaking of panic, it wasn't just about sending letters. You realize pretty quickly this road was for moving armies, too. A rebellion flares up in a western province, message flies ahead. Troops are eating lentils by the roadside less than a week later. The road is the Empire's way of snapping its fingers, first the warning, then the sword. There's a strange smell wafting through the wind now. Not bad, exactly, just dense. It's the mingling scent of horses, pine resin, roasting lentils, and dust. Always dust. The King's Road is a dust factory, and after only a few hours, it lives on your clothes, your teeth, and your existential thoughts. But you keep walking, because every stone step feels historic. You pass caravans heading the opposite way, merchants in long robes balancing crates of turquoise and dried fish. Some stop and ask if you've seen the courier. Not a courier, the courier. That's how important these guys are. Everyone's expecting one. Everyone's afraid of the news he might bring. There's even talk of blessed hooves, horses that, after years of running the same stretch, knew the route better than the riders. Some folks swear they'd stop at the right outpost without being nudged. Just pause and look back like, "You coming, amateur?" You sit down at a bend in the road. From here, you can see the path wind between two valleys, curve along the cliff, and vanish behind a cedar grove. The scale is overwhelming. You could run this road for weeks and still not reach its end. And that's the point. It's supposed to feel endless. It's supposed to remind every traveler, this empire does not break. It just bends around mountains. There's a myth told among local children that if you walk the King's Road at night, in silence, and breathe evenly with the wind, you can hear the words still trapped in the dust, old secrets, failed revolts, ghostly declarations of love from a courier who fell for a tax officer's daughter in media. You chuckle. But you also listen. Just in case. And then you're up again, walking. Because this road doesn't carry people. It summons them. You're just another moving, barely notice. But the message you carry? That's empire. That's history. And this road makes sure it always arrives. You reach the next outpost with aching knees and a crust of salt on your brow, just as a handler waves you into the shade. You've arrived at one of the way stations, and even though it's just a cluster of stone huts, a water trough, and a suspiciously lazy donkey, it might as well be the Ritz. Way stations, or chaparcanas, as they're called in the local tongue, are spaced roughly every 15 to 20 miles along the King's Road. Just long enough to run a horse into the ground, and just short enough to keep a message alive. These aren't random inns. They're official, strategic, and usually stocked with three things: fresh horses, bland stew, and somebody who yells, "What took you so long?" the moment you arrive. You stumble inside and immediately smell roasted meat and sweat-damp parchment. There's always a cook. There's always a scribal assistant trying to dry ink scrolls over a coal pot. And there's always someone sleeping in the corner with a saddle for a pillow. That's your competition, or your replacement. Way stations are empire arteries, tiny but vital. You swap your tired mount for a fresh one, trained, groomed, and annoyingly eager. Then you rinse your face in a shallow basin carved from limestone, grab a biscuit as dry as the desert outside, and bolt. 10 minutes, tops. That's how long you stay. Any longer and you're considered suspect. Are you stalling? Reading the scrolls? Trying to rewrite the king's orders because they said increase grain and you really thought they meant increase wine? Historians still argue whether these outposts doubled as surveillance centers. There's debate over whether scribes copied messages as they passed through, storing information in clay archives for cross-checking and, let's say, future encouragement of obedience. Fringe accounts speak of secret tunnels beneath larger stations, where intercepted messages were copied and sometimes quietly adjusted by robed bureaucrats with very judgmental mustaches. Out here, though, your main concern is staying vertical. Couriers are required to be alert, agile, and not prone to fainting at the sight of a snake, which, let's be honest, is everywhere. The road might belong to the king, but the desert belongs to things with fangs. Each station also has a signal tower, though you'd mistake it for a chimney if you didn't know better. Fires are the backup plan. When roads are blocked or riders lost, smoke and flame take over. At night, you might see a flicker in the hills, a coded blaze. 2 flashes means urgent summons. 1 long burn might mean war. Or stew's ready. The fire code is a bit vague, honestly. You munch on a boiled date and notice the locals gathered just beyond the station. They know what you are. They're curious, but cautious. Royal couriers don't make friends easily. You bring news, yes, but not always the good kind. One courier's arrival last winter meant conscription notices for every able-bodied male in the village. Another time, it was a tax audit. People started locking their gates whenever they heard hoofbeats. There's a strange reverence, though. You may be dusty and sore and unwashed, but you're sacred, in a way. You carry the voice of a king, and even if your voice cracks when you deliver it, it still counts. One story passed from station to station tells of a courier who rode 5 straight relays through blizzard, sandstorm, and a brief goat stampede to deliver a single line, "Let the wells be dug deeper." That's it. Just well instructions. And when he collapsed at the final station, scrolls still clutched in his frostbitten fingers, the villagers didn't laugh. They dug the wells. And they found water. Another outpost keeper tells you that once, years ago, a courier brought a message to a dying man in a remote hamlet, a royal pardon that arrived just before the execution blade dropped. The blade still fell. The messenger was blamed. He rode off into the mountains and was never seen again. Except once, during a sandstorm, when a figure on a pale horse passed a way station without stopping, scrolls trailing behind like wings. Probably a myth, but you notice no one laughs when they tell it. By the time you mount again, the wind is picking up. Dust whirls around your ankles like warning. Ahead lies the next stretch, flat, hot, and humming with potential. You've eaten, swapped horses, and stretched just enough to feel human again. The scroll is safe in your sash. And somewhere, someone is waiting for it. That's all the reason you need. The road stretches ahead like a thought you haven't finished yet, quiet, cracked, endless. This time, though, you're not just watching hooves and sunrises. You're watching what the courier actually carries. Not gold. Not weapons. Just something thin, soft, and stubbornly alive. Messages, written on anything the Persians could get their hands on. You pull one from a satchel to examine. It's stiff, tanned leather, smoothed and trimmed into a narrow rectangle. The writing flows right to left in an elegant cuneiform scroll, like a swarm of insects doing synchronized swimming. The ink? Probably made from soot and pomegranate rind. The message? Probably something like "Stop feeding the cavalry cheese before long marches." The earliest couriers didn't have papyrus. That was more Egypt's thing. Instead, they wrote on leather, cloth, bark, and occasionally clay tablets, which you try not to imagine balancing in a saddlebag during a full-speed gallop. Some clay messages were pre-baked, others were soft and had to be protected in little leather sleeves like ancient iPads wrapped in jerky. You come across a roadside scribe at a temporary post. His beard is ink-stained. His hands are steady. His job is to copy messages if needed, sometimes to prevent loss, sometimes just in case the king wants to compare handwriting later and accuse someone of forgery. A fringe tale insists that the Persians even developed a kind of portable wax tablet, reused between stations. But most of the time, they relied on what would last in the dust. Historians still argue whether leather scrolls were standardized or improvised. Some say the king's scrolls had designated color codes, red for military, black for tax, green for "oh dear gods another satrap wants the title." Others think the color just depended on what goat was available. One courier's record mentions a dispatch written on dyed blue hide, rolled tight and sealed with beeswax mixed with resin. It smelled vaguely of wildflowers and terror. When opened, it read, "Double tribute. Do not reply." You're told that some scribes sang the message aloud as they wrote it, to keep rhythm and minimize errors. Imagine someone galloping into a station while chanting, 40 oxen, 5 jars of date wine, and a dance instructor. Wait. You reread that?
Yep.
Dance instructor. You chuckle. The messages weren't just about war and taxes. Some were poetry, lavish praise of the king sent to distant cities to be recited at public gatherings. Others were romantic riddles, coded notes between court officials. And yes, more than one courier probably ended up carrying a breakup letter on behalf of a noble who didn't want to deliver the bad news in person. You hold a clay token now, impressed with a seal in the shape of a lion swallowing the sun. It's not a letter, more like a key. These tallies, often passed hand to hand, served as proof of delivery, entry permission, or prearranged barter. You give one to a way station keeper, and she nods. You're expected. You've done this before. Of course, accidents happen. The French archives mention one courier who dropped a scroll into a well. In desperation, he jumped in after it, broke his leg, but emerged victorious, with scroll in teeth and zero regret. The scroll, ironically, was a notice to close nearby wells due to contamination. Some scrolls were designed to self-destruct after reading, not in the Explode-wise spy movie way. More like delicate folds that unraveled into unreadability once the wax was broken. The message couldn't be refolded, couldn't be resealed. If it had been open en route, it would be obvious. You pass one of these, a folded triangle of linen, and wonder how many careers it ended. You pause under a knotted cedar tree. The scroll at your waist is snug, dry, and smells faintly of ink and horse. A wave of responsibility hits you. This message isn't just a scribbled note, it's a thread in the Empire's fabric. Lose it, and a village doesn't get paid. Misread it, and a governor mistakes praise for punishment. But carry it well? Then you're not just a dusty traveler. You're the beating heart of Persian communication, writing, sweating, and surviving so that the world can keep turning without tripping over its own robe hem. You adjust your sash, mount up, and keep writing. The scroll flutters slightly in the wind. It doesn't whisper, but it wants to. Your next leg begins not with a gallop, but a flicker, just at the edge of the mountains. A narrow tower, thin as a raised finger, lets loose a sudden bloom of flame. It's not an accident. It's a signal fire, and if you blink, you'll miss it. This is Persia's emergency express lane, a backup for when the roads are blocked, the couriers are lost, or the Empire simply can't wait. You stand still for a moment, watching the pattern. A short burst, then another. Then nothing. Then, there, from the next ridge over, an answering flame. Like fire playing telephone. It's beautiful and unsettling all at once. The Achaemenids built these towers high and far apart, positioned so each one could be seen from the next on clear days and moonless nights. Messages flashed from outpost to outpost, sometimes crossing hundreds of kilometers in under an hour. Of course, this required weather cooperation, trained watchers, and nobody panicking and lighting the wrong kind of wood. But when it worked, it felt like lightning that carried words. Historians still argue whether the Persians used a full-coded flame alphabet, or just a few fixed signals, like danger, arrival, run. The more conservative scholars think it was a binary fire/no fire system. Others believe each message involved a specific number of torches or smoke bursts, maybe even colored flames. One fringe theory insists they used mirrors and copper discs to create flickering Morse-like flashes long before Morse even had a beard. You keep walking and pass one of the older towers now. The fire pit is cold, but the ash still smells sharp and bitter. Next to it, a carved groove shows where the signal logs were stacked, long, dry, narrow pine lengths soaked in oil. It takes only seconds to ignite, but it can be seen from 30 miles away, provided the haze isn't trying to ruin everything. Still, this isn't a casual tool. The signal fires are only used when couriers fail, when the news is too fast and too fragile to risk on horseback. And no one wants to be the one who lit the wrong signal and made a city prepare for war when it was actually just a missing grain barge. There's one legendary mishap. The story goes that a young watchman lit a 3-flame sequence to indicate a satrap's arrival, but accidentally positioned the flames too close. The next tower misread it as royal assassination. Within hours, 2 towns had fled, 1 noble was in hiding, and a confused satrap was arrested by his own guards until everything was sorted. The poor torchman was reassigned to well-sweeping duty. Indoors. But even with the risk, the signal fire system remained a vital backup. The towers themselves doubled as watchposts and sometimes shrines. A few were rumored to hold diviners, whose job was to read the flicker, not just interpret the message, but sense whether something more was coming. These mystics sat cross-legged in the highest chambers, their faces ash-dusted, muttering phrases like, "The flames hesitate tonight." Honestly, the kind of thing that gives you goosebumps even in the heat. The couriers, of course, had mixed feelings about this. On one hand, it was faster than any horse. On the other hand, it felt like cheating. Plus, the towers often preempted them. Imagine riding hard for 2 days only to find out the city already knows your news and has eaten all the celebration pastries without you. You follow the ridge and see the signal line continue, each tower about a half-day's ride apart if the terrain's decent. You try to imagine being the guy whose only job was to sit in the wind and wait for smoke. No podcasts. No scrolls. Just you, your firewood, and the possibility of empire-level anxiety hitting you through a flash of light. But then you remember, when a courier falls, when a bridge collapses, when the road floods or rebels ambush the mail, this is what carries the message. Not hoofbeats. Not scrolls. Just light and the ancient hope that someone on the next hill is watching. You reach your next rest point, dusted in orange from the lingering torchlight. The message you carry is still relevant, still personal. The fire is for emergencies. But the horse? The scroll? That's still the soul of it all. You settle near a cold basin and unwrap a small oil cake from your pack. As you chew, the wind shifts, and for just a moment, the smell of old fire drifts past you, like a warning, or maybe just a reminder. Some words ride in leather. Some ride in light. You wake before dawn, coughing up a little desert in your throat. The road waits. The scroll waits. And so do the snakes, the storms, and the occasional lion with punctuality issues. Because here's the thing, in the Persian postal system, there is no such thing as a weather delay. The motto isn't carved in stone, but everyone knows it. Neither sand nor flood nor growling beast shall stop the king's courier. Or something like that, probably sounded catchier in Old Persian. You mount up just as the horizon bruises blue. The sky's heavy with dust and that strange static that means a storm might be coming. Doesn't matter. The post must ride. That's not poetic. That's policy. Out here, the couriers aren't just messengers, they're survivors. Their gear? Lightweight tunics, water flasks wrapped in wax linen, a knife, and a scroll pouch double-knotted against theft and sudden rainfall. Some carry a small charm tucked under their belt, an amulet made from bone or copper, depending on who their grandmother was. One courier swears his keeps scorpions away. Another claims it attracts them. You try not to think about it. The route you're taking now cuts through open terrain, flat and shimmering, but it's deceptive. The heat rises early. The air turns sharp. Even the wind feels weaponized. Every gust blasts your eyes with sand so fine, it might as well be powdered regret. And then comes the first obstacle, a sandstorm. It starts like a whisper, tiny eddies curling ahead on the road, distant brush twitching like it knows something you don't. But in minutes, it becomes a wall. You're wrapped in noise, wind, and colorless grit. Visibility drops to hope for the best levels. The horse panics. You tighten your grip and lean low, trusting instinct in whatever direction your kneecaps point. There's no cover. You ride until it thins. Historians still argue whether the Persian post system had designated storm shelters hidden along high-risk routes. Some say yes, small caves stocked with water jugs and cedar torches. Others say the couriers just learned to ride blind and pray louder. Fringe scrolls mention a rider who survived a storm by letting his horse lead the way, trusting its nose to find the next post. Both horse and message arrived. The rider never blinked again. Coincidence? You make it through. Not long after, the road narrows into a rocky pass. Steep cliffs on one side, a long drop on the other, and perched right at the edge, a lion. Just sitting there, flicking its tail, sizing up your scroll pouch like it contains dinner and dessert. You freeze. The horse freezes. The lion yawns, and walks away. You don't ask questions. You just keep riding. There's a reason the Persians didn't pick just anyone to be a courier. The job wasn't about speed alone. It was about grit. You had to outrun death and keep your message legible. One celebrated courier reportedly rode 4 days with a dislocated shoulder. Another delivered a scroll after being stung on the tongue by a wasp while drinking from a stream. The scroll simply read, "Plague confirmed. Isolate." There are no sick days. No substitutions. If your horse dies, You walk. If you die, the next station collects your scroll from your body and sends it on. One scroll was famously found on a skeleton near the southern border, still dry, still sealed. It read, "Grain prices to be reassessed." The economy didn't wait, even for your last breath. And yet, for all the brutality, the system worked. It thrived. Messages arrived. Empires flexed. The world kept moving, powered by hooves, scrolls, and very stubborn humans. You arrive at the next way station just before the wind kicks up again. The handler sees your scratched face and bleeding arm, nods once, and hands you bread. No words. No questions. He's seen worse. As the horse is swapped out, you sit on a warm stone, wrap your arm in linen, and sip water thick with the taste of clay. The scroll? Untouched. Your hands? Shaking. Your resolve? Still iron. Because when you carry the king's words, you carry more than paper. You carry the illusion of control in a world that could devour you at any moment. The next station is quieter than usual, but you don't relax. You've been doing this long enough to know that silence in the Persian postal system doesn't mean peace, it means someone's reading your mail. You enter the outpost and spot him immediately, wide belt, too clean robe, not a single sweat stain. He's no courier. He's a royal guard, stationed not to protect the messages, but to monitor you. A loyal reader of royal dispatches who doesn't technically open them, unless he needs to. And wouldn't you know it, he always seems to need to. These guards are part of a very special class of men tasked with ensuring that the message gets there intact, but more importantly, that the message doesn't carry too much truth. They're not supposed to tamper with scrolls, but you notice his fingers are stained with ink. And his smirk is the kind that says, "Oops, must have dropped that seal again." You sit. You wait. You don't blink. Because here's a secret, a significant portion of Persia's early postal system also functioned as an intelligence network. The courier corps wasn't just about speed, it was about surveillance. Messages didn't only travel from king to province. They also brought information back. How's the harvest in Ecbatana? Who's smuggling tin in Bactria? Which satrap's growing suspiciously quiet and might be building a private army under the excuse of agricultural training? And these royal readers? They read everything. Sometimes officially, sometimes accidentally, but always with the goal of keeping the imperial pulse steady, and any disobedient fingers from twitching too hard. Historians still argue whether the post watchers were directly tied to the Persian king's I spy system, or if they were simply bureaucratic overseers with a taste for dramatic edits. One school believes the two roles overlapped, turning way stations into mini intelligence hubs. Fringe records even suggest secret side scrolls, hidden messages embedded in main ones, coded via punctuation spacing or ink tone. The ancient version of steganography, baked in camel sweat. You glance back at your scroll pouch. It's untouched, but for how long? A courier next to you is getting interrogated. Nothing harsh, just gentle questions with sharp undertones. And when exactly did you receive the scroll? Did you speak with the satrap? Was the governor's daughter present? The guard's writing it all down, nodding slowly, like someone solving a puzzle that might end in either a promotion or an execution. You're not paranoid. You're cautious. Because some writers have disappeared after their messages conveniently failed to arrive. Sometimes their horse showed up days later, riderless, tired, carrying a message already delivered by someone else. The stories usually end there. You mount up faster than usual, eager to get away from the quiet watcher with the ink-stained fingers. The road is oddly smooth today, the wind behind you. But your mind races. You remember an old tale told around a nighttime fire at a distant station, of a courier who realized one of his messages had been swapped mid-route. The scrolls still looked the same, seal intact, but it had a single word changed. Instead of release supplies, it read reduce supplies. A village starved. The courier tried to report it. A month later, he was reassigned to a border post so far east they weren't even sure it was in the Empire anymore. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes the guards read messages just for gossip. Court marriages, trade disputes, juicy lines like "the governor insists the king's sandals are too squeaky." But even the smallest note carries weight. You've seen cities tremble over a single misplaced seal. You pass a series of carved stones with markings that don't match any language you know. A courier once told you these were route glyphs, used to identify which stations had safe readers and which ones didn't. Probably nonsense. Probably. The truth is, The system only worked because people feared it. The idea that any scroll might be read, any rider might be watched, kept everyone a little jumpy and very obedient. Real power wasn't the ability to send a message. It was the ability to read everyone else's, undetected. You reach the next ridge and glance behind. The station's fire pit is dark, the guard is gone, and the wind carries only silence. But your pouch is still there. Still sealed. Still full of empire. You ride through the heat like a whisper on fire, the scroll slapping softly against your hip. It's light, but it holds weight, because you know that somewhere, someone is counting on you to decode not just the message, but the path itself. Because this isn't a simple game of hand it off and hope for the best. This is a coded maze of destinations, a logistical ballet and Persia's solution, a system of secret symbols, strange directions, and, yes, proto-postcodes. You arrive at a stone marker barely taller than your knee. At first, it seems like an ordinary milestone. But crouch closer and you spot the subtle scratches, parallel lines, a tiny triangle, a smear of red pigment faded by sun. To most, meaningless. But to you? It's the sign you're on the right branch. This route leads to a satrapy capital, and the message you carry needs to arrive before the governor starts shaving sheep out of boredom. See, Persia didn't have numbered zip codes, but it had routes and rhythms, a pre-mapped knowledge shared only among trained couriers. Each station had a symbolic code, often an animal carving, a knot pattern, or a unique brand burned into saddlecloths. Riders didn't say take this to Ecbatana. They said take it to the Eagle Stone. Everyone knew what that meant. Historians still argue whether these identifiers were part of a formal coding system or just intuitive markers passed down orally. Some believe they were tattooed inside the lip of scroll pouches. Others claim they were visual mnemonics used to ensure direction under pressure. Fringe accounts insist certain messages were scented: lemon oil for the west, myrrh for the south, cinnamon for the palace, though how reliable that would have been after 100 miles of sweat is questionable. The message you carry now is marked with 3 dots and a diagonal slash. You don't need to ask. That's for Zadrakarta, a city wedged between 2 dusty ridges and known for raising goats with better posture than most nobles. It's a tricky ride, off the main road, through a loop that includes 2 unmarked fords and 1 terrifying ravine where couriers whisper that a bird once stole a message pouch and tried to hatch it. You trust the path, though. You always do. Some routes are marked with painted stones, refreshed every season. Others rely on the memory of flora. If the oleander bushes look singed, you're too far east. If the wild thyme smells sharp, you're close to the citadel. It's a language of land, where you're reading trees instead of street signs. A younger courier once asked you how you remember it all. You told him the truth, because if I don't, the king won't know whether to bless or burn a village. He didn't ask again. One of the cleverest tricks lies in horse branding. Each station's horses are marked differently, sometimes a notch in the mane, sometimes a branded glyph near the flank. You can identify which relay a horse came from just by looking at its tail's cut. Some riders memorize the horse codes faster than the routes themselves. It's the Empire's secret handshake. You cross paths with a courier going the opposite way. He nods once, lifts 2 fingers, and makes a quick loop gesture in the air, a directional sign, telling you the next fork splits east, then doubles back. It's not official, but it works. And sometimes, it doesn't. You come across a station with mismatched glyphs, eagle carved over snake, paint marks half scrubbed. Either someone's trying to reroute traffic, or someone's meddling. Messages have gone astray before. On purpose. A scroll redirected just 1 station off can end up sitting in the sun for days, missed, irrelevant, unread. Empires can topple on delays like that. There are stories. One satrap began a revolt when his request for grain reinforcements never arrived. Turned out, the message had been rebranded, intentionally or not, and ended up in a village celebrating the wrong shipment for 3 weeks before anyone noticed. They say the courier claimed he followed the lion knot. No one ever found the lion. Even today, you can see the potential for disaster in every bend. The glyphs are sometimes smeared. The tail cuts aren't always precise. And if you're riding at dusk, that all might just be a water stain. But when it works, it's magic. The scroll you carry now, with its quiet mark and soft seal, has been handed from station to station, its meaning intact not because of chance, but because of a shared code no enemy could fully grasp. The wind picks up again. You glance at the route ahead and smile. The wild time smells sharp. You're close. The sun's slipping sideways now, turning the hills to copper and the air to syrup. You ride with your shadow stretched long behind you, heading deeper into a province stitched together by dirt, smoke, and royal commands. But this scroll on your hip? It's not just a message. It's power on horseback. Because what Persia built with this system wasn't just communication, it was control. And you're riding inside that control right now. The further you go, the more you realize this isn't about helpful updates or polite reminders to clean the granaries. This is about presence. The post is proof the king is watching, even if he's 2,000 kilometers away, oiling his beard in a marble bathhouse. You pass a village now, its mud brick homes softened by distance, smoke trailing lazily from cooking fires. No one rushes to greet you. They don't need to. Your arrival already says everything. You matter. You are part of something bigger. Or smaller, depending on what this scroll says. The Achaemenid Empire stretched absurdly far, ranging from the Nile to the Industry. That's not an empire. That's a geography test with emotional consequences. And holding it together? Not just soldiers. Not just taxes. But scrolls. The postal system created a central nervous system, one command center, infinite limbs. Historians agree, the brilliance wasn't just in speed, but in consistency. Persia's royal road system allowed the king to speak to every satrap, priest, military officer, and shoemaker with equal clarity. Orders arrived before problems could bloom. Rebellions didn't get time to rehearse. Rumors didn't grow teeth. And if they did, the courier carried the order to remove them. One famous incident tells of a satrap in the western provinces who tried to block a road to stall a tax inspection. Within 3 days, a royal courier arrived with a sealed letter and 4 replacement tax agents. The original satrap? Never heard from again. The roads were cleared before sunset. Fringe tales even suggest the post was used to manipulate markets. A whisper here, a price update there, coin shortage in Persepolis, a message might read. Suddenly silver hoarding begins 2 provinces away. By the time the king actually needs the silver, it's already halfway packed. That's not prediction. That's postal psychology. You pause by a roadside rest area, not quite a full way station, just a carved bench and a shrine to Ahura Mazda, the Zoroastrian god of truth and light. A fitting audience, considering what you carry. A small girl watches from a distance, eyes fixed on the scroll pouch at your waist. Her mother pulls her gently back. It's not fear. It's respect. Even children know, couriers mean change. You might bring word of a festival. Or you might bring conscription. Maybe the governor's dead. Maybe the tax is doubled. Maybe it's just a reminder to stop stealing figs. But something always changes after the courier comes through. That's the power you're riding with. The horse is just legs. The message is the mind. There's a phrase couriers whisper when they've seen too much. The king is in the dust. It means, don't be fooled by how far you are from the capital. Don't mistake distance for freedom. Because if you can feel the road beneath your feet, the king can feel your decisions. You recall another example, less dramatic, more subtle. A distant satrap had begun building his own mini-palace, suspiciously close and designed to the one in Persepolis. Word got out. Not through spies. Through postal observation. Station scribes noticed an odd uptick in deliveries of marble, cedar, and gold-threaded banners. The pattern spoke louder than any confession. Within weeks, the scroll came, cease construction. Submit plans. The satrap complied. No blood. Just ink. It's easy to forget, with all the dust and noise and saddle sores, but this system was revolutionary. The Greeks admired it, even as they fought it. The Romans envied it. And even modern scholars, with all their gadgets and fiber optics, still marvel at how a man on horseback could govern better than some cities do today with Wi-Fi. You stand now, stretching sore legs and adjusting your sash. The scroll's still there. Still sealed. Still buzzing with the weight of centralized intent. Because the Persian post didn't just deliver news. It delivered obedience. You wake up on your side, back against a warm stone, stars fading like embers above you. It's dawn again. A new day. A new scroll. And now, a new king. Or at least, a new boss of the postal system, Darius I, the man who looked at the chaos of early Persia and decided, very politely, that absolutely none of this disorganization will do. You stretch, stand, and feel the difference in the road before you. Darius didn't just tweak the system. He overhauled it like a man possessed. Under his rule, the postal network became an obsession, a machine with gears made of fear, ambition, and timeliness. He was the kind of ruler who looked at a late message and didn't just ask why, he asked who, how, and do they still have all their limbs? He added speed regulations. No more dawdling. If a horse could handle a full gallop, it was expected to gallop. Couriers had targets to hit, and the phrase "the king is waiting" became the most chilling sentence on the trail. Miss your mark, and you weren't scolded, you were investigated. Darius also introduced multiple levels of urgency, each with its own symbol or ribbon or seal pattern. A plain seal meant routine. A triple knotted one with crimson wax? Drop your bread, mount your horse, and ride like the Empire's heart is on fire. Which, in fairness, it often was. Historians still argue whether he created a rotating shift system at major outposts, or if that came later under his successors. What's clear is that his reforms included standardized horse exchanges, mandatory message logs at each station, reward systems for early delivery, punishments for opening scrolls without clearance, yes, even by accident. There's one famous record of a courier who shaved a full half-day off the Susatus route and was rewarded with a gold circlet and a satrap's daughter. Another rider, late by only 2 hours due to a bridge collapse, had his tunic stripped and was reassigned to goat herding in the Zagros foothills. Harsh? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. You now ride on a stretch of road that Darius himself may have walked, inspecting milestones and asking deeply intimidating questions like, why does this station not smell of cedar? The man had a nose for failure. Also, an eye for infrastructure. Under him, roads were widened, bridges reinforced, and fresh supplies routed to the most demanding regions. And deadlines weren't the only thing Darius adjusted. He also set up message duplication zones, larger stations where certain messages were copied, sealed again, and dispatched along secondary routes, just in case something happened to the original. That's right, backup scrolls. You ride with the knowledge that somewhere, someone else might be galloping the same message on a different path. Insurance, ancient Persia style. There's a whisper among riders that Darius once disguised himself as a courier to test his own system. He rode incognito, scroll under his robe, to see how long it would take to cross 4 satrapies. At one station, they say, he found a loaf of bread stale and a stable hand asleep. The next morning, both the bread maker and the stable hand had mysteriously volunteered for garrison duty on the far border, where scorpion bites were considered small talk. Fringe records even claim Darius issued scrolls containing false information, on purpose, just to trace where leaks occurred. He was building a web of communication, yes, but also a web of control. And every rider was either a trusted node, or a potential fuse. But for you, riding now under a sky soft with early gold, Darius's improvements mean one thing: you're faster. More direct. You know the glyphs. You know the horses. You know what to do if a scroll starts unraveling mid-route. You don't just carry orders, you're part of an empire-wide relay of precision. You gallop past a watchtower where the sentries don't even look up. They recognize the pouch, the seal, the rhythm of hooves. They nod, and you ride on. Because now, thanks to Darius, the post is no longer just a system. It's a discipline. Your legs are sore, your teeth dusted with road grit, and your horse smells like it's been flirting with every mud puddle between here and Persepolis. But none of that matters now, because you're about to witness something ridiculously cool and deeply underappreciated: a man riding while riding. The courier ahead of you isn't just galloping, he's composing. Left hand gripping the reins, right hand holding a reed stylus, he's scratching swift lines across a stretched scrap of leather pinned to a board on his lap. No stops. No hesitation. A moving scribe in full flight. This isn't just some impressive party trick. It's a survival skill in the upper tiers of Persia's courier class. Not every message was pre-written. Some had to be logged mid-route, time of departure, road conditions, enemy sightings, or a particularly aggressive goat near the last village. The Empire demanded constant updates, and some dispatches evolved as they traveled. You catch up beside him for a moment. He barely glances at you, murmuring, "Road firm. Wind east. No vultures. Proceeding." You nod. Classic stuff. These writing scribes used lightweight tablets, thin wooden planks coated in wax or resin, sometimes even soft leather stretched taut over bone frames. They dipped styluses in portable inkwells tied to their belts or just carved dry, to be inked later at the station. And when the terrain turned too rough, they'd memorize the next few lines and write them when it smoothed out again. Brain like a saddlebag. Fingers like lightning. Fringe tales claim some couriers wrote verse mid-ride. Little poems or coded rhymes embedded between official lines. One scroll from Eastern Elam included an odd stanza at the end. The king requests grain, but I request sleep. May both be delivered. Before the goats weep. Historians still argue whether this was bureaucratic fatigue, sarcasm, or a secret code alerting the station to a hidden message. A few even think it was accidental, an exhausted writer who simply wrote what was on his mind. In any case, the goats were reportedly fine. But it wasn't all tired poetry. Sometimes the writers revised orders while writing. Not forging, just clarifying. You've heard of one courier who, upon encountering washed-out roads and displaced villagers, added a line to the king's decree, reroute supplies via river. Locals assisting. That tiny addition saved 3 weeks of confusion and several dozen lives. This is where the Persian system goes from impressive to genius. They didn't just move messages. They let them adapt. The empire trusted certain writers to make real-time decisions. They were walking routers with hearts, hooves, and grammar correction. In fact, some couriers were trained in multiple languages, Old Persian, Elamite, Aramaic, and sometimes Greek. You had to be able to read, write, and interpret fast. One station even had a tutor who taught quick script shorthand, allowing scribes to fit more words into less space, perfect for high-priority updates like Army has moved, or tax rides expected, also local wine excellent. You pass a roadside shrine where a courier once scratched a full report into the stone wall when he lost his writing board in a river. It's still legible. Scroll loss. Flood swept west. Message summary, deploy troops. Advise bridge. He carved it in 4 languages, because he wasn't sure who'd find it. And you think you've had a bad day. You pull out your own writing board now. Your wrist is stiff, but the habit kicks in. You scribble, arrived at sun high. No incident. Road solid. Locals feeding oxen near marker. One donkey unsettlingly intelligent. You clip the note to the back of the scroll. It will be read by the next relay scribe. It may even be forwarded to the palace. And maybe, if you're lucky, someone in a marble hall will smile at the donkey line and wonder for a moment about the dust-caked writer who thought to include it. You move on, your board tucked under your sash, stylus tapping against your thigh with every stride. Because in Persia's postal machine, you're not just a writer. You're the author of history in motion. You're 2 ridges away from the next drop-off point when the ground begins to shift under your horse's hooves. Not an earthquake, just that eerie, unsettling stillness that always means bad news is coming. And you, dear courier, are the one bringing it. Because sometimes, the scroll doesn't just contain orders or poetry or grain inventories. Sometimes it holds something darker. You adjust your pouch. The seal is red. The wax bears the imperial lion, claws raised, tail arched. That's not decoration. That's a warning. The scroll you carry is an alert, and you know from the weight of it, this one isn't about figs. This is the part of the job no one tells you about when you first mount up and get handed your little copper badge, that you're not just the king's voice. You're also his ears, his eyes, his alarm bell. You arrive at the next station and are immediately ushered into the back. No public courtyard. No free bread. Just a dusty room, a stern scribe, and a pair of guards who examine your seal like it might explode. One of them nods. The scroll is taken. No one speaks. Not even you. You know what's in it, roughly. You picked up the buzz at the last station. A satrap, young, rich, and recently too quiet, has been skipping reports. And when the post stops flowing, the empire starts sweating. Your message likely contains intelligence gathered from 3 directions, pieced together by riders who arrived breathless and half-blinded from sand. Together, the picture forms not a letter, but a verdict. Historians still argue whether Persian couriers were formally tasked with intelligence gathering, but the way the system operated, functionally, they were spies. Or at least informants with really fast legs. You didn't need to wear a disguise or eavesdrop on satraps at dinner, you just needed to notice what changed. A missing emblem. A shift in road maintenance. Fewer horses at the station than last week. A temple that suddenly has guards. These details were sent along in casual updates, but stitched together, they spelled mutiny. And when enough of those little updates gathered in the royal court, the king didn't wait. He sent a message back. That's the scroll you just carried. The one with the wax seal that makes station chiefs straighten their robes and lock their doors. You're not a hero. You're a harbinger. Fringe accounts speak of scrolls that triggered military deployments without a single spoken word. Carry this to Ecbatana. Do not stop. Do not open it. If the governor asks what's inside, say justice, and that's it. Within days, a quiet city was filled with soldiers, scrolls pinned to doors, names struck from records. There's one story, half legend, half footnote in a forgotten archive, about a courier who delivered a scroll to a border province known for frequent raids. The satrap there was popular, charming, gifted at dodging blame. The courier handed off the scroll. No one saw what it said. But the next morning, the satrap rode out alone and never returned. His banner was taken down. His name removed from shrine walls. Some say he was warned. Others believe the scroll was the warning. That's the role you now find yourself in. The village you just passed might be under investigation tomorrow. The station you slept in last week could be hiding a grain shortage. And your report, scribbled in shorthand on a scrap of wax bark, might be the last clue the palace needs before deciding whether a city lives or quietly folds into history. It's a strange burden, carrying news that isn't yours to read but weighs more than any saddlebag. You start to recognize patterns. You start to feel when a message is going to end someone's career. Or someone's breath. You mount again. No one thanks you. The scroll is gone now, passed to another rider, heading deeper into the intelligence stream. But the weight in your bones lingers. As you leave the outpost, a young apprentice nods at you. You were fast, he says. You don't answer. Because fast isn't always good news. Sometimes, fast means fear. The sun is high and sharp, slapping gold onto every surface as if trying to burn the truth into the world. You ride through a province that looks too perfect, freshly swept roads, smiling officials, temples lined with fruit offerings suspiciously free of flies. That's when you know. This scroll you're carrying? It isn't for information. It's for performance. The Persian postal system wasn't just about function, it was also propaganda on horseback. And right now, you're the velvet glove on the Empire's iron fist, delivering a message that might as well read, "The king is wonderful." Remember that. Say it out loud. You dismount at the station with a little more ceremony than usual. A man in polished robes meets you, all too eager. He doesn't even wait for the seal to be checked before ushering the scroll inside, his eyes glinting with a kind of practiced anticipation. You've seen this before, when the message is for the people, not the governor. Which means the scroll is going to be unrolled, read aloud, probably sung by a court bard with good teeth and loud lungs. You sit back and listen. The message, unsurprisingly, is poetic. How Darius tamed the rivers, how the gods favor the palace, how taxes are a privilege, not a burden. It's beautifully written, flowing, repetitive in that way that drills itself into your mind like a catchy song you didn't ask for. There's a line that makes 3 farmers in the crowd nod as if their wheat fields just blushed. You recognize the script. One of the king's top scribes wrote it, Karamazdu, known for mixing religion and politics like wine and honey. No surprise. This isn't the first time a courier has carried scrolls not meant to inform, but to inspire. Or control. Historians still argue whether these public address scrolls were part of a coordinated propaganda campaign or just isolated bursts of royal ego. But when you've ridden long enough, you know the signs: red ribbon, gold-flecked wax, overly heavy for the word count. That's a praise scroll, designed to land in a restless town and seduce it back into compliance. Fringe theories whisper that some scrolls were musically encoded, written in a rhythm matching local folk songs to help them spread faster. You've never seen the evidence, but you have walked past children chanting lines from a message you delivered 3 weeks earlier. That's not literacy. That's strategy. You ride past a mural being painted near a well, depicting the king, of course, atop a chariot, naturally, handing out scrolls to villagers, sure. Never mind that the real courier is usually half-starved and late from dodging hyenas. The image? The message? That's what sticks. The post system created a kind of imperial omnipresence. You could ride for a month and still receive the same scroll in 5 different cities. Different dialects. Same wording. Let it be known, The king's wisdom flows like the Tigris. Or, the rains are late, but the king's mercy is early. You once carried a scroll that simply said, "He sees you. Obey." That was it. No greeting, no signature. Just those 4 words. It was posted in 3 marketplaces. By the time you returned a month later, it had been turned into a chant, a lullaby, and, unfortunately, a drinking psalm. And here's the genius: even if the scroll was ignored, its arrival still mattered. The fact that a courier showed up at all meant the king hadn't forgotten you. You were on the map, being watched, being reminded. It didn't matter if the scroll said "harvest more millet" or "sing of the emperor's golden shoulders." What mattered was that someone wrote the message in, dismounted, and let the whole city know they were still tethered to the throne. You reach into your pouch and feel the next scroll seal. It's lighter. Standard. Probably a tax update or a report. But the one before? The gold-flecked one? That was theater. And you were the usher. You ride on now, not just with ink and order, but with the knowledge that the post wasn't just for power, it was for performance. Every gallop an act. Every scroll a script. And the Empire? Always watching from the wings. The sun dips a little lower now, tossing longer shadows across the road. You pull your cloak tighter and let the horse set the pace. No need to rush this stretch. You've entered a zone with fewer guards, more whispering trees, and quiet courtyards where people don't say much when couriers arrive. But if you listen, you'll hear it anyway. Because here's something the history books don't scream from the rooftops. Women were in this system too. Not out on the roads, not galloping scrolls across deserts in plain view, but behind closed walls, under shaded awnings, beneath piles of domestic records that just happened to be imperial scrolls. You pass a village near Reiji where the station master's wife is out front, sweeping the dust. She doesn't nod. She just watches. And if your scroll pouch twitches, she notices. Every time. You've learned to read the signs. Women weren't allowed official courier ranks, not under Darius, not under Xerxes. But they were everywhere inside the machine, as scribes, coders, translators, and occasionally, couriers in everything but name. They worked in the corners of Empire offices, managing messages, copying text, sealing scrolls, and, sometimes, adding a quiet line the king didn't write but should have. Historians still argue whether these women were officially trained or informally recruited through scribal families. The mainstream view says no women allowed, but the scrolls themselves? The ink betrays a different story. Some entries are signed with names that weren't standard mail forms. Some handwriting shifts mid-scroll, clean, tight, a little floral. The kind that comes from someone used to writing while hiding it. One fringe theory even suggests an elite circle of women scribes, nicknamed the Quiet Fold, stationed across a dozen cities, who copied sensitive documents and passed edits accidentally forward. Whether true or not, you've met a few elder station wives who can recite tax schedules like poetry and who don't flinch when a scroll arrives covered in blood. You once handed a scroll to a stern-faced man at a station in Ecbatana. He opened it, nodded, then passed it silently to the woman beside him, who read it in 3 seconds and barked, "Tell him we need more grain, not more priests." The man blinked, wrote, and handed it back. She wasn't his assistant. She was the one who actually understood the system. In another town, you found a scroll wrapped unusually, tight, diagonal fold, sealed on the inside. You almost missed it, but a station woman gently pointed out the right edge. "Unfold it like it's a dress hem," she said. You did. Inside was the real message, a warning about a rebel priest hiding gold beneath a bathhouse. You passed that message on, quietly. And yes, there were rumors of female messengers, disguised as boys or cloaked in merchant garb. The most famous story tells of a girl named Arzana who rode through a snowstorm to deliver a scroll meant for the Queen Mother, then vanished into a forest of date palms before the reward could find her. She was never caught. But her seal mark, a broken circle, was found again, years later, in a scroll carried through Babylon. You glance at your pouch now. It's unassuming, weather-stained, but inside it, possibly sealed by fingers far softer and far sharper than yours. Not every revolution needs drums. Some ride in ink and silence. You reach the next station and find a young woman sitting near the fire, scribbling something on a clay tablet. Her fingers are fast. Her eyes don't lift when you step near. But the station master waves you past. "She'll take care of it," he says. And you nod. Because you already know. In the great echo chamber of empire, not all voices shout. Some whisper. Some copy. Some seal scrolls that shape the world, without anyone ever seeing them ride. The wind's gone strange again, too warm, too quiet, and the birds overhead scatter like they know something you don't. You've been on the road long enough to feel it in your spine. This is a message no one wants. You shift in your saddle and tap the scroll pouch. The wax is still sealed, but the parchment underneath is thick, folded, heavier than usual. It's not a report. Not an order. It's a riddle. Or worse, a tax demand. You arrive at the next station, tucked between two rocky hills with a shrine barely bigger than a goat. A clerk meets you with tired eyes and more rings than fingers. He doesn't ask your name. He just says, "Is this the one from Persepolis?" You nod. He takes the scroll, opens it with a blade that's far too ceremonial for what's about to happen, and frowns. Then he sighs. Deeply. "It's one of those," he mutters. Again. You've seen them before, scrolls that carry messages meant to confuse, provoke, or manipulate. Officially, they're communications. Unofficially, they're part of what makes the Persian Empire so hard to love at tax season. This scroll outlines new levies, obscure penalties, and adjustments to weights and measures that even you can't decipher, and you've literally carried these for a living. The numbers twist. The references loop back on themselves. There's a clause that references a clause that references a dream someone had. And yes, dreams are part of the job now, too. Because not all scrolls deal in orders or praise. Some arrive stamped with the symbol of the Magi, Zoroastrian priests who double as imperial oracles. Their messages are cryptic, metaphor-laden, and somehow still legally binding. You once delivered a scroll that read only, "The flame bends west. Prepare barley." It caused a 2-month panic and 3 unnecessary weddings. Historians still argue whether these oracle scrolls were spiritual prophecies or bureaucratic pranks disguised as theology. But whatever their origin, one thing is certain, people obey them. You've seen governors freeze building projects based on the color of wax. You've seen markets close because a priest read a passage backward and declared it a sign. The line between post and prophecy in ancient Persia? Paper thin. And then, of course, there's the tax scrolls. The clerk beside you is now sweating over the numbers. "This says our copper must be weighed against sheep bladders," he mutters. Inflated, someone corrects from the shadows. Seasonally. You try not to laugh. It's rude. But scrolls like this often did more than just confuse, they divided. On purpose. By the time a village finishes arguing over what the message means, the king's policy has already taken hold. You've passed through towns mid-debate, 2 factions forming around 2 interpretations of the same tax notice. One time, it ended with a festival. Another time, with a small fire and a goat wearing a crown. And you? You just ride on. Because your job isn't to explain. It's to deliver the confusion on time. You remember a legend about a courier who brought a scroll to a border town where both the local priest and governor claimed authority. The message was written in 3 layers, standard Persian, poetic verse, and coded not sewn into the ribbon. Each man read it differently. Each man acted. Neither side won. The town still doesn't exist. The scroll was found later, and its actual translation? Wait for further instructions. You ride away from the station now, leaving the clerk to interpret financial ruin disguised as verse. There's a fire burning behind your eyes, the frustration of carrying knowledge you can't explain, can't defend, can't even trust. But still, you ride. Because whether it's prophecy, taxes, or riddles sent from golden thrones, the scrolls don't care how much sense they make. They care that they get there. And so do you. You hear the rumors before you see the border, broken roads, damaged stations, and enemy scouts trying to mimic your uniform. But as your horse crests the final rise, you spot something unexpected, another courier, halfway down the hill, wearing near-perfect Persian livery. Except his sash is too clean. His scroll is too thick. And his eyes, when they meet yours, don't carry the weight of a man who's been riding for 6 days with nothing but dried apricots and a haunting memory of a snake that looked like a rope. You pull your horse up. He does too. This is what happens when rival empires try to steal the blueprint of Persia's postal machine. Because yes, Persia did it first. But it didn't take long for others to notice that messages were moving faster than armies, faster than spies. And every kingdom from Greece to Egypt wanted a piece of that speed. You've heard it from French writers, satraps approached by foreign dignitaries offering gold for station designs. Scribes bribed to accidentally teach message-folding techniques to Phoenician merchants. And once, a Roman senator showed up centuries too early, trying to understand how Persia made an empire feel like a whisper. Historians still argue whether the Persians guarded their system fiercely or shared parts of it as diplomatic flex. What's undeniable is that imitations cropped up everywhere, but they never quite nailed the soul of it. The Greeks tried. You pass through a valley where stone pillars mark what's left of a failed Athenian relay system. Pretty columns. Useless in windstorms. Their riders wore bronze armor, looked heroic, and usually died from heatstroke before reaching Station 2. The Egyptians went the magic route. Pigeons, mostly. Messages tied to legs, soaring over the Nile. Elegant, yes. Reliable? Only if your enemy doesn't own a hungry hawk. And messages longer than a few words? Good luck with that. Even early Romans attempted a foot courier system. Tunic-clad men sprinting from villa to villa. Noble effort. But too slow. Too human. No horses. No stations. Just sore calves and scrolls soaked with sweat. You watch the imposter courier ahead of you reach for his pouch. Your hand slides to your own. A tense moment. Then he relaxes. You nod. It's a bluff. He's not Persian. He's not even a writer. Probably just a provincial official trying to impress someone. His scroll is a decoy, full of nonsense or flattery. A performance. You ride on, leaving the impersonator in your dust. Because that's the difference. Persia's system wasn't about costumes or copied roads. It was about devotion. A commitment so embedded, so relentless, that it reshaped the geography itself. Towns grew around way stations. Villages formed near route forks. People measured time not in seasons, but in scrolls. There's an old joke among couriers. You know an empire's failing when its roads are clean and its scrolls are late. And it's true. You've passed through places where the imitations shimmered with polish but felt hollow. Roads that looked the part but didn't carry the pulse. And worse, you've seen places where Persia's own roads started to crack, where the scrolls didn't come, where the riders gave up, where silence settled like dust. You pause at a ruined post house. It's half collapsed, roof sunken in, no horses in the stable. A faded eagle glyph still clings to the wall. This used to be a real station, once. You dismount and step inside. The scroll bin is empty. The ash pit cold. But scratched into the wood near the doorframe is a line you recognize, etched by some desperate hand years ago. This was the road. He rode through. It's not much, but it's enough. You mount again, eyes sharp. Because Persia built something no one else could quite copy. Not just a road, not just a relay, but a belief that a scroll carried in trust could shape the world. And even when the pretenders try to steal the road, they'll never steal the rider's heart. You're in the lowlands now, where the soil turns dark and sticky underfoot, and the reeds crowd the horizon like curious listeners. The road here winds slow, too quiet, and for the first time in days, you feel it settle into your bones. Not every scroll makes it. You don't like to think about that part. But it's true. And on this stretch, between swamp and sun-wilted village, you start finding the bonds of lost messages. The first is innocent, a torn leather pouch, half buried in the dirt, its seal long worn away. You nudge it open. Empty. No scroll. Just a tuft of horsehair and a faint smell of cedar oil. Then farther on, a charred postmarker. Something burned here. Maybe lightning. Maybe not. You ride past it, slower now. Because Persia's post system, for all its brilliance, for all its reach, still lived at the mercy of chaos. Floods. Ambushes. Wild animals. The occasional extremely persuasive highway bandit. And sometimes, worst of all, human failure. There are scrolls that never made it to their mark, lost in rivers, swallowed by fire, or deliberately intercepted. And you, seasoned courier that you are, have heard all the stories. Like the one about the scroll destined for Sardis that ended up stuffed inside a fish trap along the Euphrates, found months later by a farmer who used it to patch a roof. Or the fabled ghost scroll of Mount Behiston, allegedly dropped in a ravine and recovered decades later with the seals still intact. Scholars argue whether it's authentic. Others say it was planted for political theater. The truth? Likely both. But the strangest stories, the ones whispered at late-night stations when the tea's gone stale and the fires burned low, are about messages that vanish altogether. No rider. No horse. Just silence. One tale tells of a courier named Bahram, last seen galloping into the mist with a scroll marked urgent, eyes only. They say his horse came back 4 days later with no saddle and no wounds. Just dust. So much dust it filled the air around him like smoke. The scroll? Gone. No one speaks his name above a whisper. You pass another relic, a wax seal embedded in a clump of hardened mud. No scroll. But the seal tells you everything. It's royal. It was important. And it didn't make it. Historians still argue whether Persia kept a log of lost scrolls, a kind of reverse archive documenting every message that failed to arrive. Some claim these absence ledgers were kept in Persepolis, buried beneath tax records and grain tallies. Others say they were burned with the scrolls themselves, to keep the shame of delay from staining the empire's image. But the stations remember. You reach one now, barely a hut and a half. A scribe nods wearily and takes your message. You hand it over with extra care. It's nothing dramatic, just a court update on harvest quotas, but it matters. Because this is the first scroll this station has received in 2 months. The scribe reads it like it's water. He shows you the last scroll he got. What's left of it, anyway. Torn edges. Ink bled from rain. Someone tried to rewrap it in cloth, but by then it was already ruined. The date? Over a year ago. You don't ask what it was supposed to say. Sometimes, when a scroll is lost, the consequences are immediate, crops wasted, soldiers unprepared, laws forgotten. But other times, the consequences grow slowly. A governor makes the wrong choice. A border city misinterprets silence. A trade route shifts just slightly. And by the time the palace notices, it's not just one scroll that failed. It's a fracture in the empire's spine. But here's the thing. You write anyway. You accept the dust, the risk, the chance that your pouch may never open in the hands of its intended reader. Because the scroll is only part of the story. The effort matters. The ride itself is the empire. You mount again. The path is narrow. The light's turning copper. And ahead, somewhere in the reeds, you swear you hear the soft clink of another courier's belt buckle, lost, maybe, or just late. You ride toward the sound. Because someone has to carry what's left. The wind shifts again, cooler now, tinged with a trace of smoke and something sweet, maybe myrrh. The road's worn here, more memory than stone. You've entered the part of the empire where people say nothing lasts, where cities crumble fast and even the sun seems to sag by late afternoon. But what you're riding through now is something that outlasted its builders. The empire may crack, rulers may change, capitals may burn, but the postal road still breathes. You pass a signpost, weather-beaten, almost illegible. But you know what it says. You've passed it a dozen times before. It's not just a location marker. It's a reminder, this is where the system lives. Not in palaces. Not in scrolls. But in movement. In connection. Because the truth is, long after Persepolis falls to Alexander, long after the satraps kneel or scatter, the roads remain. And on them, still, people riding. People carrying. People remembering. You stop for a moment near a cluster of ruins. Once a Grandway station, now a heap of silence. But someone has hung a copper bell from the edge of a broken arch, and tied beneath it, a faded sash. Courier read. Still nodded. Still proud. You tie your own next to it. That's the tradition. No ceremony. No trumpet blasts. Just the quiet, deliberate act of saying, I was here. I rode this. I mattered. Because you do. And not just you, every rider who came before. Every leather pouch soaked in rain. Every scroll tucked under a dying horse's flank. Every whisper of hoofbeat through night-black hills. All of it lives on. Historians still debate how long the Persian post lasted in practice. Some say it faded within decades of the Achaemenid collapse. Others argue it lingered, ghost-like, through successor states. But in your bones, you know better. The system didn't disappear. It sank into the earth, soaked into culture, passed its patterns like an echo from road to road, empire to empire. The Greeks borrowed its bones. The Romans stole its skin. But the spirit? The spirit stayed Persian. One fringe record tells of an old rider, toothless and half-blind, who lived alone in a collapsed station north of Susa. Every few weeks, a child would bring him a fake scroll, scribbled nonsense, stuffed in a pouch. He'd squint at it, nod, and whisper, "Still writing. Still writing." You believe it. And now, you ride into a village built along a ghost road, where the houses mimic the old relay layout, and the children call out scroll measurements like games. One girl even shows you a little wax tablet she carved herself. "I'm a courier too," she says. You don't correct her, because she is. And when you hand off your final scroll for this route, light as it is, just an update on river levels, you feel it in your chest. This is not an ending. This is another link in the chain. One you were lucky enough to carry. You turn your horse toward the horizon. One more leg. One more day. But already, you know, the message got through. You ride the last stretch slower than usual. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because something in the air tells you this is the end of a route, and maybe the end of a chapter. The road ahead fades into grass and soft hills, and there's no marker waiting, no grand station or horn blast of welcome. Just one last lonely post house tucked into a copse of wind-whipped trees. It's small, silent. Its roof sags a little. You dismount and stretch your aching knees, feeling the stiffness settle like a final scroll in a bin. Inside, there's a man. Old. His hair is a whisper. He gestures for the pouch, and you hand it over. He doesn't check the seal. He just places it gently on the table, like it's not a scroll but a memory. You sit across from him. No words yet. Just the sounds of the post house creaking gently around you, and outside, the wind brushing through dry leaves like it's flipping pages. He finally speaks. You made it. You nod. But it doesn't feel like triumph. More like completion. Because this isn't about glory. You weren't chasing conquest or coin. You were chasing continuity. Connection. The delicate thread that held an empire together. One scroll, one hoofbeat, one station at a time. The old man hands you something. It's not a medal. It's a scroll. But not one to deliver, one to keep. You open it. Inside, a single line. You carried us further than you know. And now it hits you. Not all messages are meant for governors. Some are for you. For the rider who never stopped. For the hands that stayed steady. For the one who carried not just words, but the weight of belonging. You stand. The old man nods once more, then disappears into the shadows of the post house. You mount again, slowly this time. No urgency. No destination. Just the sky above and the rhythm of hooves below. The wind smells like cinnamon bark and old ink. The horizon is soft, pale, endless. And as you ride, the world seems to hum beneath you, not loud, not sharp, but steady. Like hoofbeats. Like parchment being unrolled. Like a whisper moving from one soul to the next. You're not a courier anymore. You're part of the message itself. The road quiets behind you, falling gently into memory. No more stations. No more scrolls. Just the long exhale of a journey complete. You let your breath slow. The horse beneath you moves at a walk now, each step deliberate, each hoof pressing lightly into the soft earth as if trying not to wake the dust. The sky is a canvas of muted blue and distant gold. Somewhere, a bird sings one last sleepy note. Then silence. And in that silence, something settles in your chest. Not pride. Not exhaustion. Just peace. The kind that only comes when you've carried something that mattered, and delivered it safely. You look back once. The post house is already lost to the trees. The message has moved on. And so have you. Your body relaxes. The tension in your shoulders melts. Even your breath stretches longer now, matching the rhythm of twilight. You're no longer riding towards something. You're just drifting, floating, letting the echo of the road hum beneath you like a lullaby. And somewhere deep inside, you know the system still lives, not in scrolls or couriers or stamps of wax, but in every connection, every act of faith, every time one soul reaches for another and says, "This matters." So close your eyes. The road is behind you. The stars are above. And everything you carried has found its place. You did enough. You can rest now. Sweet dreams.